Ritual is a third-person action RPG with dungeon crawler elements included. It is a game where the player must interact with NPCs, fight and defeat enemies, search for items, and solve puzzles. The player is defeating hordes of enemies, completing quests, and solving puzzles to ultimately defeat Dracula in the end. At first we intended it to be a dungeon crawler brawl game, however, we slowly realized that it was acting as an adventure game more, so we decided to go that route instead. We also intended it to have more levels than what we ended up with, but realized that we would not have enough time to create the amount of levels originally intended. Because we had spent so much time building and rebuilding our level, we decided to make the ritual rooms as smaller offshoot levels that the player would need to access through the ritual portals instead. The player must speak with NPCs to gain objectives and collect items to help them through each part of the castle. After completing the objectives, the player must return to the NPC for their reward. They will not be able to begin another objective until they have received their reward. They must also solve book puzzles by paying attention to their surroundings and complete ritual rooms with hordes of enemies to unlock doors and progress through the castle. They must search for items around the castle in barrels, cupboards, and chests to keep up on their health, blood, and power-ups to survive the waves of enemies. There are abilities that the player may use against enemies and upgrade with Dark Essence gained by defeating enemies to strengthen their abilities. Each ability, when used, costs the player a different amount of blood, which they must pay attention to and refill with their blood pickups. The player has two weapons at all times, their sword and their bow, each serving its own purpose against the different types of enemies. The bow serves the player best against fire mages because they will back away from the player if they get too close, making it difficult for the player to get close to them. The sword is used for enemies that get close to the player and are easily reachable. With our initial capstone project, we were going to make a 2D top-down dungeon crawler, point-and-click game. However, we decided that we would attempt to go above and beyond in creating a third-person action-adventure game instead. Having each teammate work on a separate part of the project was a technique that worked for us. We would rarely have troubles uploading to Perforce because everyone was working on a different piece. We would also keep each other informed with what we were working on the entire time. That way, one person was not working on the same part of the project as the other. We would create a task list at the beginning of the week and mark tasks as complete as soon as they were done. That way, the entire team knew what was complete and what still needed addressing. Occasionally, we would not upload to Perforce until the day before the project was due, and we would have to spend all of Sunday trying to fix errors or inconsistencies at the beginning of the project. We created switches on the walls that the player had to shoot with an arrow to open doors, but then found that they didn't fit with our theme of the game. We ended up taking those out and created a book puzzle instead that acts as secret switch entries, trying to build the level in 3D space instead of 2D space first. One of the skills that was found most useful was creating scriptable objects that could be accessed from multiple scripts. This allowed for cleaner scripts and for easier access to certain objects such as weapons and abilities. Another skill that we found to be useful was working with Pro Builder objects in Unity. We found that we could manipulate walls and stairs much easier than if we were not using the Pro Builder objects. Lastly, we found the Unity Asset Store and Mixamo useful with finding already built assets and character animations. This made it easier to build the level, work with animations, and have ready-made materials and textures for aesthetic purposes.